Okay, so you guys had what?
You press the return home button on a drone.
Okay, so if I press the return home button on a quadcopter's remote, what's the algorithm for what it does?
Essentially, we had it just like stabilize where it's at, look for the signal of the remote that you're using, and then elevate to whatever signal strength is like closest, like whatever elevation it is, and start going towards it. To counter something, elevate or descend to sort of compensate for that or go around it. And then if it gets to signal strength, it's sort of like slowly descend it more.
Okay, cool. So you're kind of assuming that your drone has enough brains and enough sensors, right, to not run into stuff at high speeds, right? Because you can't really put bumpers on a quadcopter, right? So
you could direct it to move very slowly.
Yeah.
Doing that, so it doesn't damage itself if it does run into something.
So the limitation with that, right, is a hardware limitation, which is that quadcopters have like maybe 30 minutes flight time for even the really good ones. And by the time you press the home button, right, you've probably burned 2/3 of that. Does that kind of make sense? So that's another one of these, like, okay, so I'm writing an algorithm, but am I taking into consideration the like hardware problems that I'm writing the algorithm for? Like, do I have sonar? I don't know. Depends on the drone. And you guys did a bunch of that at the beginning, right? Like, what is your drone capable of? How smart is it? What sensor package does it have? So my understanding of what the DJI return to home button does is it actually flies straight up after you hit the button to a preset altitude and then returns to you on directly at that altitude and then sets down. I believe, don't quote me on this, that they have some kind of a mapping that lets them avoid tall objects.
If they don't use it in a tree area, don't go up.
So that's actually why they have that kick straight up a ways. So what it does, I believe, is you push the button and it flies to like 450 feet and then follows back along that ceiling. And so they do have enough sonar to know where the ground is. And so they stay at that 450 feet above the floor. And that keeps it out of power lines and out of people's houses and off of radio towers and windmills and like all of that jazz. But the 400 feet is kind of a golden number because you also don't want it to go to 5,000 feet because at 5,000 feet, what's it going to encounter?
Well, it might be a nuisance to some aircraft.
Low-flying planes. And the very worst thing that you could do with your DJI Phantom 4 is hit a Coast Guard helicopter over Chesapeake Bay, which happened 2 weeks ago. Apparently the Coast Guard was. Yes. And they knew who it was because the thing hit the rotors and disintegrated, of course, right? And one of the little chunks of it containing a motor got thrown into the crew cab, like into the cargo compartment of the Huey, and then they found it afterwards and called DJI and read them the serial number and asked who owned this, because we are going to come down on them like a bag of hammers. Cool. So, algorithms are important, and this is that first stage of algorithm, right? We've gone through with like really coarse instructions. And then as you're trying to make this happen, you'll go through with one finer set of instructions, and then another finer set of instructions. And with the beer fridge guys, Chris's algorithm was very quickly morphing into pseudocode. And that's really kind of how that goes. You do broad steps, and then maybe sub-algorithm steps, and then as you try to write down the sub-algorithms, you're going to end up doing a bunch of these flowchart diagrams and a bunch of like if this, then that kind of statements. And that's the pseudocode level.
I believe there was a theme where the chart was, it explained what percent is spent where. I believe they said that the actual time spent coding is somewhere around 10% of the process. The rest is mostly algorithms, pseudocode, and then like checking for errors at the end and making sure everything's good. Only about 10% of the time are you actually coding when it comes to those large scales.
Yeah, that's probably about right. And the modern ethic is to write really decent pseudocode and then pay programmers overseas to actually write the code. Because it is, as it turns out, not that hard to turn good pseudocode into code. It is really frickin' hard to generate good pseudocode. And that's the thing that software engineers really end up doing. Cool?